Tensions were high as former President Donald Trump ramped up trade battles, slapping steep tariffs on imports from Canada, Mexico, and China. His goal? Reshape global trade rules, even if it rattled markets along the way. But just when things seemed set in stone, Trump made a surprising move. On February 3, 2025, he hit the brakes on a planned 25% tariff on Mexican imports, at least for now. Why the sudden change? A closed-door talk with Mexico's President Claudia Sheinbaum led to a new agreement. Mexico pledged to send 10,000 National Guard troops to its northern border, stepping up efforts to tackle illegal immigration and drug trafficking. In return, the U.S. agreed to put tariffs on hold for 1 month to allow negotiations. Leading the charge for the U.S. in these talks are some of Trump's top officials: Secretary of State Marco Rubio, Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent, and Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick. Their mission? Strengthen border security and cut off the flow of fentanyl into the U.S., a crisis that has devastated communities nationwide. Meanwhile, north of the border, Canada had its own response. After what Prime Minister Justin Trudeau described as a constructive conversation with Trump, Canada rolled out a $1.3 billion border security plan. This sweeping effort includes deploying more helicopters, advanced surveillance technology, and nearly 10,000 additional border agents. Canada is also appointing a new fentanyl czar to lead the fight against the deadly drug trade, officially designating major cartels as terrorist organizations and launching round-the-clock monitoring of its borders. To back all this up, an extra $200 million will be pumped into intelligence operations targeting organized crime and drug networks. With these commitments in place, Trump agreed to delay new tariffs on Canada for at least 30 days, giving both nations time to work out the details. But that didn't stop him from stirring controversy. In a fiery social media post, Trump took aim at Canada's trade policies, claiming, "They don't even let American banks do business there. What's that about?" The comment left many scratching their heads. After all, U.S. banks have been operating in Canada for decades. As for Canada, it wasn't just the federal government taking action. Several provinces launched their own countermeasures. And in a bold move, one province even cut ties with a major U.S. company tied to a close Trump ally, Elon Musk. Canada isn't sitting back. In response to U.S. trade policies, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau has fired back with a massive wave of retaliatory tariffs, slapping a hefty 25% duty on over $100 billion worth of American goods. This strategic move is designed to protect Canadian industries while sending a strong message to Washington. Among the hardest hit industries is poultry. Canadian buyers will now face significantly higher costs when importing American chickens, ducks, turkeys, and even geese. The restrictions apply to everything from live birds to frozen cuts, leaving no room for exceptions. This is a major shift considering that in recent years, the U.S. has been a primary supplier, shipping over 286 million pounds of chicken north of the border. With the new tariffs in place, that number is expected to take a sharp dive. Dairy imports are also caught in the crossfire. Canadian consumers will soon see higher prices on everyday staples like milk, yogurt, and cheese, especially those containing added flavors, fruit, or sweeteners. This comes as a blow to American dairy farmers, who have been gradually expanding their access to Canada's market under the USMCA trade agreement. With these new barriers, their opportunities are shrinking fast. Egg producers aren't escaping the impact either. Whether fresh, cooked, or preserved, American eggs and egg-based products now face the same steep tariffs. Last year alone, the US exported nearly $151 million worth of eggs and egg products to Canada. But with the higher costs, Canadian buyers may start looking elsewhere or ramping up domestic production. Meanwhile, processed foods are taking a hit as well. Popular grocery items like peanut butter, sauces, seasonings, and condiments are now facing additional taxes, which could make them far less competitive in the Canadian market. Canada has historically been one of the biggest buyers of American peanut butter, with imports totaling nearly $39 million in 2022. However, with these new tariffs, that number could drop significantly, forcing Canadian retailers to adjust their supply chains. Even the liquor industry isn't spared. American whiskey, including Kentucky bourbon and Tennessee whiskey, is now subject to a 25% tariff, making it much more expensive for Canadian consumers. The impact will be felt across the industry, as Canada has long been a key market for U.S. spirits, importing $6 million worth of American whiskey last year alone. With prices rising, Canadian buyers may begin turning to other sources, or cutting back on imports altogether. Beyond food and drink, tariffs are also affecting everyday essentials like packaging materials and household paper products. Canadian businesses that rely on American-made cartons, boxes, toilet paper, and facial tissues will now face higher costs. Just last year, Canada imported over $5.2 billion worth of paper products from the US. But with these tariffs in place, businesses may need to reconsider where they source their supplies. Canada isn't pulling any punches in its response to US tariffs. As tensions rise, the Canadian government has unleashed a wave of countermeasures, targeting a wide range of American goods. From everyday household items to high-tech appliances, these new tariffs are designed to make a serious impact on US exports. One of the most unexpected casualties? Toilet paper. Canadians may not realize it, but the vast majority of their toilet paper supply comes from the US, with imports totaling a staggering $1.26 billion in 2022. Now, with higher tariffs in place, both businesses and consumers will likely feel the pinch. Beyond paper products, the crackdown extends to plastics. The US has long been Canada's primary supplier of plastic goods, exporting everything from bags, containers, and packaging materials to stoppers, lids, and caps, totaling over $15.4 billion in 23. Even plastic waste isn't spared, as Canada was the top destination for American plastic scrap, importing more than 154,000 metric tons last year alone. Furniture and home essentials are also getting swept up in the trade dispute. Canada is now slapping tariffs on wooden furniture, mattresses, bedding, and cushions, all of which are major American exports. In 21 alone, the US shipped over $4.9 billion worth of furniture and bedding to Canada, accounting for more than half of its total exports in this category. With these new tariffs, the cost of outfitting Canadian homes with American-made goods is about to climb. Appliances are also on the list. The cost of American refrigerators, freezers, and washing machines is expected to rise as Canada enforces new tariffs on household and commercial models. In 2023, the US exported over $106 billion worth of refrigerators and freezers to Canada, along with $214 million in washing machines. These price hikes could push Canadian consumers to seek alternative brands from Europe or Asia. And it doesn't stop there. Everyday household items, things you wouldn't normally think twice about, are getting hit as well. Items like candles, pens, brooms, brushes, and even mops are now subject to new taxes. The US exported more than 2 renewals, some $40 million worth of these cleaning supplies to Canada last year, but with tariffs in place, shoppers may see prices creeping up in stores. Meanwhile, a separate wave of tariffs is being imposed on paperboard packaging materials, an industry where US exports to Canada reached $524 billion in 23. This move is expected to impact American manufacturers that rely on Canada as a key market for their products. But Canada's response isn't stopping at tariffs alone. One of the biggest moves so far comes from Ontario, where Premier Doug Ford is taking things to the next level. In a dramatic escalation, Ontario has cut ties with Elon Musk's Starlink, canceling a $100 million contract that would have brought satellite internet to remote parts of the province. The deal, originally signed in November 2024, was meant to connect 15,000 homes and businesses with high-speed service. But Ford made it clear, Ontario won't do business with companies tied to those who, in his words, are hell-bent on destroying our economy. That's not all. Ontario has also introduced a ban on American companies bidding for government contracts, locking them out of an annual $30 billion procurement market. This decision is expected to deal a major blow to US firms that previously relied on Ontario's business. In an even more unexpected twist, the province has also ordered the Liquor Control Board of Ontario, LCBO, to pull all American-made alcoholic beverages from its shelves. With Ontario importing nearly $1 billion worth of US wine, beer, and spirits every year, this is both a symbolic and economic slap in the face to American distillers and brewers. Ford isn't stopping there. He's hinting at even more restrictions on US businesses operating in Ontario, with potential impacts on the auto industry, tech sector, and trade agreements. Meanwhile, provincial officials are already working to shift supply chains away from American suppliers, looking instead to domestic manufacturers and European markets. And in a bold political move, Ford has called for a snap election on February 27th, arguing that Ontario needs a stronger mandate to fight back against US economic pressure. Canada fights back as US tensions escalate. The trade battle between Canada and the US is heating up fast, and Canadian provinces are stepping up with bold countermeasures that go beyond tariffs. From liquor bans to infrastructure penalties, the economic standoff is taking unexpected turns. British Columbia has made it clear where it stands. Premier David Eby announced that the province's liquor distribution branch will immediately stop purchasing alcohol from US states that back Trump's tariff policies. This isn't just about economics, it's a direct political message. On top of that, British Columbia is exploring new taxes on American streaming services and tech platforms, aiming to push consumers toward homegrown alternatives. The province is also shifting its trade priorities, pushing to expand agriculture and seafood exports to Asia. The idea is simple. If the US wants to play hardball, British Columbia will look elsewhere for trade partners. Nova Scotia is taking a different approach, hitting back where it hurts most: transportation and infrastructure. Premier Tim Houston announced that highway tolls for US commercial vehicles will double, making it more expensive for American truckers to use Nova Scotia as a trade corridor. This move is expected to put pressure on US companies that rely on the province for logistics. Meanwhile, Nova Scotia is also cutting off American liquor sales. By February 4th, US-made alcohol will be pulled from provincial liquor stores, reinforcing Canada's growing effort to limit American imports. These measures are designed not just to push back against US tariffs, but to generate additional revenue for the province. Quebec is taking a broader, more systematic approach. Premier François Legault has ordered a full review of government contracts with American suppliers, signaling that companies tied to U.S. trade policies may soon find themselves shut out of Quebec's economy. In response, Quebec is looking to strengthen trade relationships with European and Asian partners, particularly in pharmaceuticals and construction, two key industries that could be hit hard by U.S. tariffs. At the same time, the Quebec government is rolling out subsidies to help local businesses reduce their dependence on American goods. The message is clear: if the U.S. makes trade difficult, Quebec will accelerate efforts to become more self-sufficient. Further north, the Northwest Territories are also making moves. The government is actively working to cut American suppliers out of its procurement process, shifting toward domestic and international alternatives. Premier R.J. Simpson emphasized that remote regions must prioritize economic resilience and reduce reliance on U.S. imports, especially for essential goods. The territory is also focusing on building stronger trade ties with Indigenous businesses and Arctic nations, further diversifying its economic partnerships. As Canadian provinces take decisive action, Donald Trump has been stirring the fire from Washington. In a fiery social media post, he took aim at Canada's banking industry, claiming, incorrectly, that U.S. banks are banned from operating in Canada. His remarks fueled further tensions as he continued to criticize Canadian trade policies and demand major concessions. But then, he went even further. Trump revived a long-dismissed idea, absorbing Canada as the 51st U.S. state. He framed it as a solution to trade disputes, claiming that statehood would bring Canadians lower taxes, stronger military protection, and an end to tariffs altogether. His words sent shockwaves through Canadian political circles. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau immediately rejected the idea, calling it an insult to Canada's sovereignty and a reckless escalation of tensions. Across the country, outrage spread quickly, with critics dismissing the proposal as a desperate attempt to pressure Canada into economic submission. But Trump wasn't done. In another social media rant, he lashed out at what he called the tariff lobby, blaming Wall Street and globalist elites for standing in the way of his trade war. He accused Canada, Mexico, and China of taking advantage of the U.S. for decades, citing unfair trade deficits, lax crime policies, and weak drug enforcement as evidence. At the heart of his message was a warning to American manufacturers. Either bring production back to the U.S. or face the consequences. He acknowledged that the trade war could cause short-term pain, but insisted it was necessary to build a stronger, self-sufficient economy in the long run. The latest round of U.S. tariffs has sent shockwaves through financial markets, leaving investors scrambling and economies on edge. Stock markets around the world took a hit as uncertainty over global trade deepened. In Europe, major indexes tumbled. Germany's DAX slid 1.5%, France's TAC dropped 1.3%, and the UK's FTSE 100 dipped percent, reflecting mounting investor fears. In the US, the impact was immediate. The Dow Jones Industrial Average plunged more than 500 points at the opening bell before staging a partial comeback, ultimately closing near its previous level after a temporary pause on Mexican tariffs was announced. At the same time, currency markets reacted swiftly. The US dollar surged, strengthening against key global currencies, while Canada's dollar plunged to its lowest level in 2 decades. The euro also took a hit, reflecting growing anxiety over potential trade barriers affecting European industries. In Mexico, the peso initially plummeted before clawing back some of its losses. Meanwhile, commodities weren't spared either. Oil prices spiked briefly, fueled by concerns over supply chain disruptions, before settling lower as markets adjusted to the uncertainty. Metal prices fell sharply, with investors anticipating weaker demand as global trade slows. The economic ripples of the tariffs are spreading fast, and world leaders are taking notice. As tensions rise, the backlash has been swift. Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau wasted no time announcing countermeasures, vowing that Canada would impose its own retaliatory tariffs in response. Across the Atlantic, the European Union issued a stern warning, making it clear that any tariffs on European goods would be met with a forceful response. Meanwhile, China has taken its case to the World Trade Organization, WTO, setting the stage for a legal battle between two of the world's largest economies. But it's not just world leaders sounding the alarm. Economists are growing increasingly concerned about the long-term fallout of these policies. Many warn that tariffs could drive up costs for everyday consumers in the US, while countries like Canada and Mexico face economic slowdowns due to decreased trade. Analysts are also predicting a rise in inflationary pressures, which could weigh on global economic growth in the months ahead. Even as the trade dispute escalates, the US government has made some exceptions, but not without consequences. A key adjustment involves a reduced 10% tariff on Canadian energy exports, including oil, natural gas, electricity, and critical minerals. While this is significantly lower than the full 25% rate, it still introduces new costs that could disrupt cross-border energy flows. In defense of the policy, the White House argues that this carve-out is necessary to prevent a sudden spike in fuel prices for American consumers. But oil industry experts aren't convinced. Many warn that even a 10% tariff on Canadian crude could cause major headaches for US refineries, especially those in the Midwest, which depend heavily on Canadian oil with few immediate alternatives. Adding to the economic shift, the administration has also moved to close a long-standing loophole on small imports. Previously, purchases under $800 were exempt from tariffs, allowing consumers to buy low-cost goods from Canada, Mexico, and China without extra fees. But that's now changing. With this exemption gone, millions of online shoppers will start feeling the pinch, as small transactions are no longer shielded from trade barriers. As financial markets adjust and trade relationships fracture, the consequences of these new tariffs are just beginning to unfold. If you enjoyed watching this video, be sure to like and subscribe.